Hello, baseball fans. Matthew here with another edition of the British Baseball Podcast. And this week, I'm delighted to have alongside me Alex Malihoudis, who some have described as being one of the greatest outfielders who ever played a game in Britain. Alongside me, I have a co-host in the form of Will Lintern, the GB national team catching and pitching coordinator. And what a lot of people don't know is that Will and Alex go way back, and we're talking like school days at Tonbridge Bobcats baseball, which is a really nice surprise because Alex had no idea that Will was coming onto the show to do co-hosting. And I did what all good hosts would do and just let them talk shop and just sat back and listened and enjoyed one of the best conversations I think I've heard about baseball. And me and Will talked about some of the questions we had beforehand, and they worked into some of the conversation. But I think what you'll find is a really fascinating chat and insight into the career of one of the Hall of Famers. Yeah, so I hope you really enjoy this episode. I'm really proud of it. And I had not a lot of input into it, so you'll be glad to hear that my voice doesn't feature much in this episode, but I think you'll really enjoy this one. And before we go any further, I'd just like to invite each and every one of you to subscribe to the show if you can. And if you can leave a little review, that'd be great. I'll read some of the best ones out, or just any of them, if there are any. And also big thanks go out to Stephen Hope this week, and also Paul Vernon for supporting the show over at buymeacoffee.com/Brit Baseball Pod. So that goes towards the Zoom packages and some of the other bits and pieces that I've got going on, and that really helps out this month. So thank you, gentlemen. Really appreciate it. And also, one last one before we get into the conversation. If you want to come on the show as a guest, or even as a co-host, or you think that there's somebody out there with a really interesting story to tell about their journey into baseball or within baseball, then please let me know, and I'll see what I can do to try and get them on. Usual channels are britishbaseballpodcast@gmail.com, or you can hit me up on the social medias at BritBaseballPod. And without further delay, here we go. You're listening to the British Baseball Podcast. Yeah, well, that's what happens when you give a guy a microphone with no journalistic experience and absolutely no idea how to use a computer for editing or anything like that. So, yeah, my music production, as I said before, if only could translate that over to this, I'd be an happy man. But it's not as easy. Where did you hear about my music anyway? Was it on one of my old?
Oh, it's on your. I think it's on your Facebook profile.
Oh, is it?
It said that you were a DJ and a producer formerly.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I was curious about that because I played around with Ableton a bit, and I'm rubbish. I'm completely rubbish, but I have an interest in electronic music. So,
what did you make?
I was trying to. What are them? Car alarms mostly. It was trying to make sort of progressive-y sort of techno stuff, but it's pretty. I always got to that point where it needed someone with mastering skills, and and that was it really. So I got a bunch of stuff that's just sort of sitting there sounding crap or sounding rubbish. But
So your baseball is better than music.
I do it for fun. I'd say, probably yeah.
Yeah,
I make a huge amount of money doing either.
No, but my MySpace page is still there.
Oh, is it?
Still, yeah. With all my old music, and I think I spent like $2,500 on a course. I did something ridiculous. Like I took out some like £7,000 in 2006 to do this music production course in Manchester, like one of the best music schools. Shout out to School of Sound Recording, Manchester. And I think it was $2,500 for the course. And I was like, well, I've got all this money left over. I need a computer. So I bought the best thing that I could buy. Literally like kitted out an entire studio in a bedroom. And I was useless. I had all the gear and no idea. I was literally the definition. And I was just like, oh man. So like I bought some more stuff from a DJ and bought like a Alan Heath Zone 92 mixer, which was like, there's some of the like Sankeys in Manchester didn't even have this mixer at the time. And I had like other DJs asking me to borrow my equipment, and I was just using it in my bedroom. It was absurd. I just had all this cash and just wasted it.
I've got the Zone in the garage. It's the one that Richie Horton helped to build. It's not the 92. I've forgotten which model it is, but yeah, I took out money on my mortgage to buy it. Not a good decision.
No. Amazing sound though. The neighbors must have hated it. Yeah, But I ended up selling it to I sold all my equipment off. Some kid in Russia bought the mixer for like a couple of quid less than I paid for it second hand. And I've no idea where my turntables went. I've moved house that many times. I think either someone's just walked off them out the back of my car, or I just don't know where I left them. And someone sat there going, I wish he'd come and pick these bloody turntables. Would have been sat in my house for 15 years. Yeah, 12, 10.
Well, Will and I, in our career, we've encountered plenty of people that have all the gear and no idea, I'm sure. Including us, probably.
Myself included. My goodness, yeah. I mean, I tell you what, I just close this one off on music, but Alex was actually my introduction into electronic music. You know, being a kid that was into heavy metal and wearing bike chains and whatnot.
Yeah, man.
Electronic music wasn't always my thing, but Alex introduced me to alcohol.
That's my first story, Will. That's the bike chains. We were going on a baseball trip. I forgot where we were going, and they took Will's bike chain off him going through security at the airport. I mean, LA. Yeah, it was this long, right? I mean, what are you going to do with the bike chain? I mean, you can't do with a belt, but they took it off him. I guess it looked intimidating. And excellent.
Got it back. When we landed, I had to go to security, and they had it in. I think they put it in Lost and Found or something like that. So
excellent.
Good to
hear. That was awesome. But that's fantastic. I tell you what, I'm always intrigued, Alex, by how you got into baseball. I think it's just a nice story, especially with where baseball's at and how people find it and the journeys that they get into the game. I mean, it's a shame you became a Giants fan, admittedly, as much as I'm a Bay Area guy, green and gold for me. But how did you could tell Matt and everyone who's on, like, what was your entry point? Like, how did you become a Giants fan? How did you fall in love with baseball?
Well, I didn't really have a sport. None of my family really played sports, but I loved sort of, as a 10-year-old, I really loved American culture, not 9-year-old, I should say. And my mother went to see my uncle who lived in New York and came back with a baseball bat and a t-shirt and a hat. And so I was like, sweet, I want to play baseball, I'll see if there's a team. And there was a team in Tonbridge. It had just started. It was run by a lady called Margaret Borley, who I think one of her sons had spent some time in Texas in grad school and had come back with a bug for baseball, started a team. And she had decided she wanted to start a youth team. So I was the fourth member of the team in 1989, so we didn't have games. I practiced with them and would go and watch the seniors play. But I was just lucky enough that this amazing person, Margaret Borley, happened to live in my town and happened to have decided to start a baseball team because she was incredible. She just had lots of enthusiasm. She subscribed to the belief that everybody should get a chance. There's a time and a place for competitiveness, but when you're 9, 10 years old, she just wanted to give people a chance. And she started this youth team. Within a year, all my mates from school were playing. We won. I think we went 6-0 on the season, 6 games, not a lot, but we were. Ended up having 2 youth teams by the end of 1990. The second youth team, which was the eldest team, so the 13 to 15s, was comprised of quite a few people who went to Hayesbrook. Now they would be walking home across the playing fields and seeing us practice, and a couple of them joined in, notably the Carter brothers, who went on to be, Nick's a Hall of Famer. Both his brothers, John and Ben, both pretty handy ball players. And by the end of the second year, they won a title in our age group. And we had a pretty dominant stretch, I think, for a good few years youth baseball. So Mrs. B, she was pretty special. I remember when I was in my early 20s, I was in a pub in Tonbridge, and this scary bloke walked in, like proper, just looked like he came straight out of prison. And the guy I was with goes, "That is the toughest bloke in Tonbridge." I can't remember the guy's name, but not the kind of guy you want to approach. And probably half an hour later, the guy sees me. Hey,
It was Will Lintern, is that right?
It was not. It was Barry Lintern.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah.
This guy clocks me, and he comes steaming over towards me. Like, I'm thinking, what is it? This guy comes. He's got me in his sights, and he comes over to talk to me. He says, "You're Alex, aren't you?" I said, "Yes." "Did you play for Tonbridge Bobcats?" I said, I did. She goes, Mrs. Borley, she got me into baseball for 2 years. She was the only person who ever cared about me. I was like, this tattoos up his neck and everything. And I brought a tear to my eye, just the way that he remembered that someone gave him a chance to actually to play a sport, didn't judge him by his situation, and gave him a chance, So that's the kind of person she was. So yeah, really, really special person, really special lady.
I mean, she really is. There are so many amazing stories about Margaret, and we could probably, and I think Matt and I are hoping at some point to get Margaret on and have a proper catch up and talk about her time at Tonbridge and that journey. But I guess, the thing that I find amazing with Tonbridge is the juxtaposition, because she created this amazing community where, the chap you just spoke of, the hardest man in Tonbridge, he wasn't the only person that was hard up on life that found baseball as a vehicle to change something in them. And at the same token, it had become a hotbed for talent. If you look at in that short amount of time, the number of GB players that came out of Tonbridge, and in comparison to other hotbeds where you've got a lot of Americans or American parents feeding into it, so there's kind of quite a lot of good players or good traditional good coaches to feed off of. Tonbridge kind of almost had a DIY sense about it. Do you have any thoughts about what it was about Margaret and the culture that she built at Tonbridge that helped both the things, create as many talented young ball players, but still also make it a place that was safe and fun for anyone to come off the street and play?
I think the enthusiasm that she had was infectious, and she was always willing to take you along to watch senior baseball around the country. In fact, in 1990, my favorite players in the world were not Will Clark, although he was up there. It was Oscar Marcelino. It was Alan Bloomfield. Those are my guys that she would take us up to London and would watch them play in a Sutton football stadium. We'd watch Oscar in 2 home runs over the right field bleachers, and she was always willing to take you along if you had that interest. It wasn't the baseball coaching, because she was learning the game just like we were, but she had the ability. Like, people would treat her like a babysitting service. They'd bring their kids into Tonbridge at 10, and they'd want to go shopping in the market, so they'd drop them off at baseball, come back at 12 and pick them up again. 60 kids. She had 60 kids sometimes down there, all engaged, all running about doing stuff, no one bored. I don't know how she did it, to be honest. And I was young at the time, so maybe the subtleties of what she did was lost on me, but I just remember never being bored, always loving it. So
it's interesting, that point that you just made about your heroes being guys like Oscar Marcelino and Alan Bloomfield, because I think about one of the national team coaches right now, Jonathan Cramen, who's head coach of the U15s, and he obviously has had a very successful career with the London Mets and has played for the senior national team. He often talks about his era of childhood when BSUK were putting out a magazine called Double Play, and in it, like, every week were articles about you and Nick Carter and Gavin Marshall. And Jonathan latched on to those personalities at that time more than, say, Mark McGuire and Sammy Sosa. And I think it's really interesting how there is this connection with, if we can connect the stars of British baseball and the stars of GB baseball to the kids in it, there is something magical about it. It's not just hocus pocus. There's something to do with talent development that I think probably bears more attention and more effort than perhaps has been given.
Yeah, having heroes that you kind of have a chance to emulate, I think is an important thing. Whereas sometimes watching guys on TV playing baseball in the States in packed stadiums sometimes doesn't feel achievable. But it's having publications as well. I think that was a huge thing. I'm trying to remember the name of the magazine that I've still got in the loft in my mum's house. where all my junk is. Sorry, Mum. But I've got the old Baseball UK magazines with Oscar on the cover, and Lenario and Simmons and Enfield Spartans, and those were the teams that I wanted to emulate, the players I wanted to emulate, and the teams I wanted to beat when I got older. So yeah, it was.
I'm with you, man. I mean, I genuinely, I think probably one of the most important parts of my development and my continuing the game, other than obviously meeting Margaret and joining the Bobcats, was going to Tonbridge practice and meeting you and Nick. And Nick obviously had long hair at the time, and he had an A's hat, so therefore that automatically made me think he was cool. And then you just happened to be there, so I was like, all right, well, I guess this guy he'll do too. I'll play capture them for a little bit. But the and openness that you guys showed to me I would have been 9 or 10 at the time, and obviously that continued from when I first started going to GB practice, when I joined the Bucks, like that connection and that willingness and openness to spend time with someone who wasn't yet at that level, but you guys created that environment where I was able to enjoy it, and it was fun, and it was amazing, and I think you're spot on.
I think that came from Mrs. Borley, but I think there's just no. I never understood the point in trying to bring others down, and you see it so often. Is maybe insecurity causes people to not want to help people, but I mean, making baseball better in Britain is only going to benefit everybody. So
yeah. So,
go on.
Sorry, no, you go. What are you going to say?
I was just going to say that was nice you mentioned John's name, because we played together in 2008. So yeah, he was a good guy, and yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what, I have to add John to the mix as well, because when I was 14 and I was just trying to break into the national team, like Vince Garcia and Paul Vernon both said to me that I needed to play adult baseball. And I know you and Nick had advocated that as well. And I was 14, and I mean, I could barely catch a fastball. I mean, some people might say I could barely catch a fastball now at 36, but I remember John advocated for me to give me playing opportunities and to catch pitches that perhaps I wasn't quite ready to catch. And I guess when I look at each of my development stages, I caught Gavin in 2002 in that final. I wasn't ready to catch a 90-mile-an-hour fastball, but Savage gave me that opportunity. When I got to Menlo, I wasn't ready to catch college pitching, but Bowman gave me that opportunity. There's kind of all these different examples, and John Carter, and all the work he continues to do in Tonbridge is just fantastic. And I add him to the list as well.
I think playing adult baseball is a great advantage that we get in countries where baseball is not as developed. Like it's not likely to happen in the States for a 15-year-old to play adult baseball, but it happens here in Australia. And I encourage, if I'm talking to 15-year-olds, I encourage them, even if they're not playing in state league or the top leagues, just to playing against adults. It gives you a different perspective. And I remember I was catching a game for Brighton in Britain in 90. I was 16 at the time, and I got lit up at home plate by a 110 kilo massive bloke from Hemel. That kind of stuff doesn't happen in youth baseball, but it does toughen you up a bit. And I think it's good to challenge yourself. So I'd always say, if you have the opportunities, do both. Play your youth baseball, but play up if you can.
I mean, you were a catcher, shortstop, and center fielder in my time of knowing you. Which of those three did you enjoy most?
Catching. Catching's the best. Catching is just there's no position that I can imagine in sports that's as much fun. I mean, I've never been a quarterback on an American football team, but catching's just the best. I love it. I love you're in the game constantly. There's a lot of challenges. I mean, I would still do it this year. I'm playing baseball over here. It's in a league many rungs down the ladder. But up until last year, I was catching and playing shortstop. This year, I'm just playing shortstop. It's finally, my back has finally said, I had enough. And we've got a really good catcher on our team. So and I miss it. I really do miss it, and I wonder if I'm ever going to do it again. But yeah, it's the best. Yeah, it's fun.
That's awesome. Obviously, Craig was one of the more recent guests on the podcast, and how did you and Nick meet Craig? How did that transition from Tonbridge to Brighton come about? Because I feel like that's pretty.
Yeah.
It's a pretty special moment in your development, and I guess even the rise of the Brighton Buccaneers.
Yeah, well, so in the end of '94, I've been playing for. So I was 15. I've been playing for the Tonbridge seniors for a couple of years, and I wanted to play in the top league in Britain. And I'd met that year '94. I'd been to Holland with the Great Britain junior team. And I'd met Ben Gogan. And so I was trying to weigh up, where did I want to play? Did I want to play in, it was Enfield, London Warriors, or Brighton were the sort of choices. And Gogan was saying, come down to Brighton. And so he arranged a meeting with Craig Savage. Now, I'd spoken to Nick about this. We both agreed. We both agreed we needed to be playing in a sort of high league. So I still remember the walk down to Mrs. Bawley's house to sort of break the news to her. That we weren't going to be Tonbridge Bobcats after that. And it was a pretty hard conversation to have, but, I don't know what I was worried about, because Mrs. Bawley, she only wanted what was best for you, and she was fully supportive, and I could see where we're coming from. And yeah, just yet another example of the amazing person that she is. So Ben had arranged a meeting with Craig down in Lewes in a pub. Went down there, met Craig. He shook my hand, nearly broke it off. Big firm handshake, and he was telling me about his plans. And the guy was just seriously organised, and you could just see that he wanted to put this team on the map, and he was going to get it done. But he did say something to me that made me laugh, and I generally would be quite self-deprecating if I had to evaluate me. But this one time, he told me that he might start me off in the Division 3 South, see how I get on. And I remember thinking in my head, no, I'm not doing that. And I was determined I was going to make the team, make the first team. And, and I did. And that was my first year at Brighton, myself and Nick. Nick pitched, I caught him. We had a good team. We were probably third or fourth that year. And it wasn't until probably a couple of years later, we moved to Pavilion Field, and we started getting really good. So that's when we got Will Lintern down there.
Until you got me, yeah. That is an interesting character trait that I don't often think of with Craig. But now that you bring it up, he would always, didn't matter who it was, he would never necessarily lay out the red carpet and be like, oh, welcome, you're now our new hero. It was always, all right, well, this is a pretty good program. We know what we're doing. We have some good players. You need to prove yourself. And it didn't matter who it was. And I remember, even in 2001, when we had the Rolex National League, and we benefited from some tremendous talent with Rene Halitzius and Oscar Lopez and even Clayton Fredericks. Like, they still got that kind of, let's see how you do. And then obviously, they were good enough players that they broke in. I think the only time it was different was when Gavin got off the plane and pitched a final complete game. But that's Gavin, and he's throwing 90. So if you're ever do it once in your career, that's the time you do it. But yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, he didn't blow sunshine up your butt, but and he had a plan, and he executed his plan, and he was there's a lot of people working hard in British baseball to promote the game, but in my time being part of British baseball, I've never seen anyone who was able to promote it quite like Craig, to get local interest in Brighton, to get celebrities wanting to help us, to get money from people. We've got a star on the Walk of Fame in Brighton, and we were known there. You go into if you went into Subway to get a sandwich in Brighton, they had our schedules on little cards on the bar. You could order a sandwich and take one of our schedules, and it was just so organized, and he really did a great job. That team was amazing to play, and I had a great bunch of guys too. Even before I got there, some of the personalities on the team, it was just fun, and it was good baseball.
Indeed. How did you? What was your journey to the States? Because I would hope that we've probably got quite a few listeners on who are kind of in the U18, U15 GB setup, and hopefully have ambitions of playing in the States. And what was your journey? Because you did high school first, is that right?
Yeah, I did. I started saving money from age 10. I didn't really have a social life. My life was baseball. Not much different to now really, but just with kids instead of baseball. But I basically I had wanted to do this. It was a dream of mine, but I wasn't sure how I was going to do it. So what ended up happening, I'll try and, in 1995, there was an advert in Baseball UK about a camp in California. I thought that sounds interesting. We spend 2 weeks in the sun playing ball. So we wrote in, myself, my brother and my mum came along, but they weren't part of the camp. They just wanted to come to the States, So we went along. It was right during the players' strike at end of 94, early 95. So a bunch of what they had planned had changed, but they had a bunch of games scheduled against local high school teams, local college teams. Two of the teams we played Archbishop Midi High School, De Anza, which is a junior college in San Jose, and we played Menlo College, which is a Division III college up the bay a little bit. So I went to Midi, and you've never seen, this was like my dream of an American high school where I wanted to go. It was a private Catholic school, beautiful baseball field, absolutely gorgeous, just incredible facilities. To be honest, that's all I really cared about in the school anyway, was the baseball field. I had a chat with the coach. The guy that I was playing for had arranged a talk with the coach at the end of that. And I told him this is what I wanted to do. He said, okay, let's go talk to admissions then. So we had a tour of the school. We had a chat with admissions. He says, come back on Friday. So I went back there on Friday. And by the end of that day, I'd enrolled in the school. It turned out that because I was out of state, the money I had, it would have cost me more to go to a public school than it would private. So that was it. I'd enrolled at Archbishop Midi High School. Just so happens that I didn't know this at the time, that it was one of the premier baseball, athletic leagues in all of America. There were 8 teams in the West Catholic Athletic League. Giving an example, Pat Burrell and Tom Brady graduated the year before I got there from, Tom Brady went to Serra, the same school that produced Barry Bonds. Burrell went to Bellarmine. Countless major leaguers, basketball players. Aaron Gordon from the Orlando Magic went to the school I went to. There's just a host of professional athletes played in this league. It was just, for me, it was just dumb luck. I was lucky that we played that game. I was lucky that I was able to attend that school because it was seriously good baseball. And when I first went over there, I was overmatched. I didn't realize quite how overmatched I was until American football season finished and all of the really, really good athletes came out for baseball. And day one of that, I'm watching Zeph Zinsman launching balls over the gym and thinking, this is like crazy. I'm not ready for this at all. So luckily at Archbishop Midi, I played for Bill Hutton, who was the head coach there for many years. Just one of the great high school baseball coaches in the history of California, since retired. Just a great man and a great baseball coach. And he spoke to me before the season and said, look, I can play you in JV, junior varsity, and you'll get a lot of at-bats. But I'll only do that if you're coming back next year. And so I'm thinking, do I have enough money to come back next year? Because if you can't come back next year, I'm going to put you on the varsity. You're not going to play a huge amount, but you'll have the experience of being part of a good team. Now, I was a junior in high school. So there's 4 years in American high school. I was in the 3rd year. Juniors don't play JV. So the area where I really struggled was just game experience, as being actually playing baseball games. And I think that's the same challenge that everybody has playing baseball in a country like Britain, is you just don't have enough repetitions in games. You can practice all you like, hitting balls off a tee into a net. You can practice taking ground balls if you've got someone to hit them to you, but the actual experience of playing a game that's hard to emulate without actually doing it. So, and you need good weather for that. You need lots of people in small areas, so you can have lots of local games. It's a tough one. So I had to get over that hurdle. So my first year out there, I played JV. Went back my second year, played varsity. It turned out to be a great decision. I started at third base. We won our section championship, which is a memory I'll never forget. And I was all the better for it, for getting those at bats my junior year. So it was tough to take, because I there were only 2 or 3 juniors at JV that year, but it's what I needed. I needed to get the games, and we were competitive, so they weren't just gonna put me in for the sake of it. So.
Sure. And I mean, Menlo was just up the road, so was that a fairly easy decision for you to stay in that local area and move it on to Menlo, or were there other colleges that you were thinking about?
I was thinking of there was a school down in San Diego I was thinking of, but Menlo made sense for me. I knew the area. I had a girlfriend at the time in the area too, and that made some of the decision for me as well. But yeah, so just up the road to Menlo, which has now become a sort of a place for British baseball. Yourself and Miles is playing there at the moment. So yeah, it's nice to see. It's nice to see that program also has developed over the years.
They've got, I mean, they really have come on leaps and bounds. It's incredible. I mean, they're producing professional baseball players and regularly competing for championships now.
They are. And another reason why I sort of like staying in that area now, I didn't mention this earlier, when we were at Tonbridge, we were part of the Major League Baseball Envoy program, and they'd send American coaches, high school coaches, college coaches to parts of Europe, and they'd spend 6 weeks somewhere, right? So they sent us a gentleman called Bob Brandy, who was a high school baseball coach from San Mateo, very close to Menlo. And he rocks up, this is 1993, so this is 2 years before I ever went to the States. So he rocks up in Tonbridge. He's staying with us for 2 weeks in my bunk bed, because I have the smallest room in the house. It's just me, my brother, my mum in our house, and I had like a closet. And because it was so small, my bed was like above my desk. It was one of those like kids. So there's like a 45-year-old man who's staying for 2 weeks in like a bunk bed. And he rocks up to watch a game. He says to us, I want to come see the guys play. I don't want to coach on day one. I just want to watch a game. And I'll see what I'm working with. So he comes down to watch us play. Third base coach lying in the third base coach's box, smoking a cigarette. It was a beautiful hot day, had his shirt off, And so it was an eye-opener for him. And this is where, we had a lot of talent in Tonbridge, but we didn't know the game. We didn't know what was appropriate. We didn't know how to play the game properly. I can tell you 6 weeks of Bob Brandy in Tonbridge, you would, and if you ever get Nick Carter on this program, ask him about the development of the guys, and what he was able to do for us as a team. It was incredible. And Bob and his brother Tom, who lives in the area too, became part of my family when I was in the States. I would see them often. Sometimes I'd take the train up to San Francisco and to go and see them. I'd watch a Giants game and then go and stay at Tom's house, and I'd see Bob would take me to an A's game, and so they were also local. So that was part of my decision about Menlo too. Was I knew the area. I felt an affinity to the San Francisco Bay Area, and I wanted to stay. So,
your reference and talking about the MLB Envoy program, I mean, that might be, if I could change one thing about baseball in this country right now, it'd probably be to bring back the Envoy program. I've lost count of the number of times people like yourself, Liam Carroll, Nick Carter, I mean, the influence that those envoys had in that short amount of time is tremendous. And credit to those coaches to come over to a country like England, which, it's not a third world country, but you're sleeping on a kid's bunk in Tonbridge in a small closet room to come out and coach baseball on a field that, it's basically bases and some fence posts, purely out of the love of the game is fantastic. I really do hope that we can find a way to bring a program like that back.
Yeah, I think it was, a lot of the coaches are mostly younger. I think some of them were just out of college and they wanted, a way to spend some time in Europe and coach baseball as well. But yeah, Bob was pretty special. He was a seriously experienced, talented coach. We were lucky to have him. So,
what was it that he sort of brought to the coaching game then? Like, because like, what difference did you notice? Was it the intensity or the knowledge, or was it a combination of a lot of things compared to what you're used to? How did it make that much of a difference?
It started with just how you behaved on a baseball field. Like just knowing what was appropriate, knowing, sort of, well, first of all, being organized, getting to the field and actually going through a stretching program before playing, and actually having organized windows of time to do certain things before we start playing. Second was like focusing when we're actually on the bench, not just, I'm not participating in the game right now, so I'm not really going to chat with my mate. It was being there 100% of the time and being sort of part of the game, even if you weren't actively playing it at that moment. Feeling like a team, instead of just a bunch of guys that met up and, swung a bat and fielded and whatever, actually, and knowledge of the game, actually understanding the game. So yeah, there was a lot of different elements. I think if you do anything and you haven't had that level of coaching before, it does make a huge impact on you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Alex, obviously, someone like you, I think, and certainly I feel this way, just looking at your career and the things you've achieved. Like sometimes it just feels that baseball just comes easy and things have been fantastic, but obviously it hasn't always been that way. And I think back to the injury that you suffered right before your senior year at Menlo. And I just wonder, could you maybe talk about, don't have to go into too much detail, but a little bit about the injury and then how you dealt with that adversity, how you came back. I mean, I have a very distinct memory of what I saw in that final I think it would have been the summer of 2001. It would have been 2001, right?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. I might jump in at the end, but give us your...
So I was going into my, it was just the Christmas before my senior year at Menlo. So I was a couple of months from moving back to the UK at that point, and there was a GB training session down in Southern California that was for mostly for people that were US based. So I spoke to my college coach, Blair Nagel. I said, look, I want to go down there. My mate lent me his car, and I drove down. I drove the 6.5 hours down to LA. We played a couple of games. We were playing Cypress Community College at the time, who are one of the, I don't know these days, but at the time they were one of the top junior colleges in California. Big leaguers had big leaguers go there, but pretty good school. And during in and out, I jumped to catch a ball and landed and hyperextended my knee and tore my ACL. So the funny thing about that was, before I left, my college coach said, yeah, you can go play, just don't get hurt, just don't get injured. So I called him. That was another hard conversation. I rang him from my hotel to tell him what happened, and he was nothing but kind and supportive to me. But then he always had a pretty dry sense of humor. I remember seeing him on campus the next time I was on crutches, and I'd come out of my dorm, and he was across the quad, and we sort of locked eyes, and he just bowed his head and shook his head and just walked off in another direction. It was just so typical. So I missed my senior year playing, which was disappointing, because that was definitely a tough few months, and I was definitely chomping at the bit to play again after I had the surgery.
How did you deal with it? I mean, because we'll come back to, but essentially the next time you played was an at-bat in the final where you drove in the winning run.
Yeah, that was funny because how did we'll come back to the winning run, but how did you get there? Like how mentally, how do you go from my knee is toast, I've lost out my senior season, I haven't had an at-bat since I guess January or whenever it would have been, and then you pick up a bat, step in the box, and it's final time. Like I had the surgery in April, so this is let's see, I moved back to the UK at the end of May 2001, so in April I had the surgery. I was walking again by end of May, but I was told, 6 months. So that takes you to what, November? So, and I'd heard stories, Jerry Rice, a professional American football player, had come back from an ACL surgery after 3 months and then broken his kneecap during that game. You hear stories about that, and so you think, I don't want to rush it. I want to make sure that I allow 6 months to happen. But it meant that I wasn't going to play in the Euros in 2001 for Great Britain. And I played in '99 in Italy, and it was just one of the best tournaments ever. But yeah, that was not going to happen. So it was difficult. But I tried to. My friend Kevin August, who's my best friend in the world, he, one of my great friends. There's a handful of them, but Kevin's right. He's my best mate, and he had come over to play for the summer, and so he was still playing for Brighton. So I'd go down there on weekends and we'd play baseball games, and I'd just be a cheerleader on the bench. Final time came along, and Martin Dutton, our centre fielder, bless him. I don't know if he did this on purpose. Actually, I know he didn't do this on purpose, but it worked out for me because he was playing centre field, and I think he got rung up. I think he was called out sliding in the second. And was not happy with the call, so he let the umpire know that he wasn't happy and got tossed from the game. And I ran out into the field. I didn't even have my glove. I was dressed in baseball uniform. Wasn't wearing cleats. I ran out into the field and I grabbed his glove and I went out to centre field and told Craig on my way that I'm playing centre field, and that was that. So I was so desperate to play, and it was the 6th inning. There was 3 innings left of the entire season, but 4.5 months in, in fact, it'd been longer than that because I hadn't played nearly a year and a half at that point. I was desperate to play, and so that's how I found myself in centre field and in the set at the top of the 7th of the grand final.
And then I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, you come up to bat. It's been an overcast day, and I don't know how this type of stuff happens, but we've got a runner at second base, tied ball game, clouds open, a little bit of sunshine. You hit a line drive to right field, winning run scores, and then the sun goes back dark and rainy. I'm 95% sure that's exactly how it played out.
That's how your dad tells the story, I'm not sure it was quite that dramatic, but I do remember crapping myself going around first base because I wasn't wearing cleats, and it was a wet day. It was cloudy and rainy, and so I'm going to hit this ball down the right field line, and I want to get to second, so I'm kind of doing that thing where you're like, oh, I don't want to slide, I don't want to fall flat on my butt or rip my other knee up or anything. So I went gingerly around first base, but it was pretty special. That was my one at bat of baseball for that entire year, and we won the title. So I'll never forget it.
I mean, speaking of special at bats, what about you driving the winning run against France in that 2000 the all special 2007 European Championship?
I mean, I think that 2007 season was hard, and I've had definitely a fair amount of adversity playing baseball over the years. And you talked about how tough it was with coming back from knee surgery. The hardest thing I've dealt with ever playing baseball, and I deal with it even to this day, is the anxiety of playing a sport and the pressure that we put on ourselves. And that was always my demon, and it always held me back, I think, was, you find me on a field practicing, and I'm happy and stress-free and, doing behind the back passes to flips to the second baseman and turn double plays and just having a whale of a time. But, there's an anxiety in playing games that always I felt held me back. In 2007, I decided that the level of Great Britain baseball got to the point that it was becoming difficult to compete in European championships. The level of European baseball was skyrocketing, and it was hard for people working 9-to-5 jobs to actually go from playing baseball domestically in Europe to going to a European championship and facing guys playing minor league baseball. So I had decided that 2007 was going to be my last year, and I was going to go all out for it. I'd found through Ian Young, former GB player, I found a team in Germany, and they were willing to fly me out to Germany on weekends. So I would go out there 3 to 4 times a month. I'd fly out there on a Friday after work. I'd play double headers, usually Saturdays and Sundays maybe, and fly back Sunday, go to work Monday. And the idea was the German league had pretty high quality of baseball at that point. It was mainly the pitching. I wanted to face good pitching on a weekly basis, hard 85 to 90 mile an hour pitching, which I wasn't getting domestically. So I did that. I went to great pains to do that. It was a stressful year. And then 2007 Euros came about, and this time it was in September to allow the minor leaguers to play. It was going to be tough. We went out to Germany for a pre-camp, and I still hadn't made the team. No one had made the team officially yet. And after the final day, I was called into Stefan Rapaglia's hotel room. Stefan, another just phenomenal coach and a great man that I've been lucky enough to play for in my life. And he broke the news to me that I didn't make the team, which was pretty devastating, his reasons were valid. They were trying to get into the Olympic qualifying round and trying to get funding, and I understood the reasons. But he said because of my attitude and what I meant to the team, that I was going to come along as like a 25th man. I think the roster was 24. I was going to be 25th guy. He said, look, if you were 24 on the roster, you probably weren't going to play anyway. So 25 is, it's not much different, but it meant that I wasn't on the team. So I ummed and ahed for a night. A lot of guys, Bradley Marcelino, Alex Smith, a lot of guys told me to come. They said they needed me to be there. So I said to him, yeah, I'll come along. I was rooming with Alan Dean, strength and conditioning coach. It was me and him, and I came along to Barcelona, and we had an injury in practice before the first game, and that was that. I was on the team. I was the 24th man, and I got a game. I got a pinch hitting appearance in our second game against France, drove in that run. We won the game. And that was it. I played 3 out of the last 4 games. I had a few hits. I was part of the team, and I played. I started in right field, I think, probably 4 games after that in that tournament. So, yeah, it was a whole roller coaster of emotions. Not making the team, and then finding out I was back in, and then actually getting to play and contributing. It was just out of nowhere, and that was going to be it for me. But then, of course, we had it was inconvenient that we made it to the final and qualified for the World Cup in 2009. I thought, well, there's no way I'm not being part of that team. I'm going to go do the same thing. I'm going to go all out. And in 2009, I actually went to live in France. I spoke to my company. I asked if I could work remotely. They said, yeah, 4 days a week. They cut my hours, and I went to live in France for 6 months. And that was better because I was there and I was practicing regularly and I was facing decent competition. And that year I made the team, 2009. I didn't have to. I wasn't the 25th man. I was on the roster. So yeah, it was. And that was it. I retired after that. Hung them up, satisfied. Probably having played the most competitive baseball in my life in that tournament. Never seen anything like it. I mean, you were there, Will.
It was a special couple of weeks. I mean, there were so many ups and downs and so many amazing highlights. I still see the game against Puerto Rico when we were up, and then we had the throwing error and it didn't quite work out for us. But I also come back to the Cuba game where, and Matt, for context and for the listeners, this is a Cuban team where was it, September? So all week, what would that have been? July, August, Aroldis Chapman had jumped the fence and defected. In center field, Yoenis Cespedes. First base was Gurriel.
Jose Abreu was on the bench. He didn't even get in that starting team. They had Leonis Martin was their center fielder. Cespedes, I believe, hit a 2-run home run in that game.
Yeah.
It was a good team. And Puerto Rico had 7 former major leaguers on their team.
Yeah.
This was the best baseball any of us had ever played. Most of us, anyway. I know a couple of guys, but it was special.
Yeah, it really was. I tell you, just to go back to that story of adversity, Matt, we need to save that audio, because if we come all the way back to Alex's point about looking up to heroes, and I know Alex doesn't like it when I refer to him as a hero, but he was for me as a young player, and I still think he is. I mean, he's in our Hall of Fame. That story of dealing with adversity and taking the chance that's given to you is something that, you know, we normally talk about. Oh, well, here is a big leaguer that, you know, we all talk about, and if you Google him, you can find a video. We've got someone, you know, born and bred from Tonbridge who's been on that journey, and when given an opportunity, came off the bench and justified his place on that team, got a hit that scored the winning run. That, I mean, that victory against France was pivotal in our ability to climb the table and eventually finish with a silver medal at that tournament. So Matt, let's take that audio out from here and let's save it, because I think more kids need to hear, even if nothing else, just that excerpt. I hope that's okay, Alex, if I continue to this hero image of you.
Oh, that's fine, mate. Yeah, that's absolutely fine. Yeah.
That's all.
No, thanks, mate. It's not always easy. You know, there's I think the way society is now, it's actually more and more athletes are, you know, it's easier to actually express to the world that it isn't easy. You know, it isn't easy, and they struggle sometimes. So I think it's good to know that everyone goes through that, and yeah.
Awesome. What advice? I'm just thinking again. We mentioned that you played 3 positions. I think you are one of the standout players of the last 20 years that this country has produced, and even played in the NBL. Obviously, you benefited from playing high school and college in the States. But is there anything from that time before you left for the States that, you know, if we've got a 10 to 16-year-old kid who's in the UK, how can, you know, were there any things that you did to maximize your practice time, to figure out ways to get things done in Tonbridge when we don't have the facilities that our counterparts have?
I'm gonna, hopefully there won't be any repercussions, but I'm gonna dob my mum in here, because I mean, I couldn't have done any of this without my mum. She was absolutely just gave up her life for 10 years to just drive me places and get me, and then the 10 years after that, I believe it was your family that got me places. I never owned a car in the UK. It was taxi Lintern constantly, like just drive me to games. And I mean, I couldn't have done anything without any of those guys. But my mum went up to, we live right by the A21 bypass, and she hiked up the hill and grabbed a traffic cone off out of the roadworks there. So I'm really hoping she's not going to get in trouble for this. But I had a traffic cone batting tee in my back garden. I managed to rig together it was a net for golf swings, and I rigged that together, and I would hit off a tee, you know. And there was a family that had there was a garage right by the green down the end of our road, and there was a wall, and tennis ball, glove, and a brick wall. I mean, ideally it would have been a baseball, but it's amazing what you can do with a brick wall to increase your baseball skills, your hand-eye coordination, the quickness of hand. Like I learned that through literally throwing a tennis ball against the wall in a park. So baseball is a game of repetition, and I've already said that you need to play lots of baseball games, and that isn't always going to be possible playing baseball in Britain. Hopefully one day it will, but if you don't have that, then you need to work on your skills, and you can always work on your skills, you know, if you have a little bit of space. Now, if you don't have a garden, you can still be swinging a baseball bat. You can don't necessarily have to hit off a tee, but those drills, just doing them every day, getting that time in, that's absolutely pivotal. And if you can get to a field and grab someone to hit you fly balls, hit you ground balls, and pitch to you, do soft toss, then all the better. But
love it, man. I love it. I think sometimes, especially in the world of athletes, we spend so much time looking at the individual and what they've accomplished, and you forget to look at the support network around them. And just put you right in the middle. If you look at the framework of support that your mum provided, just as an overall, like, here it is. Then you've got Bob Brantley and other coaches visiting the country, interaction with GB coaches to give you a little bit here or there, the Carter brothers pushing you on. And there's quite an interesting network where you say, maybe it's not the perfect system for talent development, but when you take all these things and add them together, you give someone a pretty good chance to get good at something.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's very hard to do it all by yourself. I mean, it is, you see people do it, but having support from, I mean, yeah, my mum put up with a lot of stuff. You know how I learned to do a relay? I learned to do a relay by standing in my living room, throwing a ball off that wall, it coming back, catching it and throwing it off that wall, and then it coming back, and just repeating, throwing a tennis ball off the living room wall constantly. Banging, like noises banging through the house, and my my poor mother and my brother putting up with it. So yeah, I mean, it's very difficult to do. I owe them a lot. I've had a lot of great experiences playing baseball over the years, and a lot of the great things that have happened to me in my life have been because of baseball, and it's thanks to people that have helped me along the way. So
that's awesome.
Thank you, man.
There's one thing I really like there is the fact that you've got no excuses for not doing something, and there's one thing I've noticed about being part of the Smart Performance Academy, both this time and when I was on a training program like early on last year, that there's always something you can do, regardless whether you don't think you've got the equipment. Like with the program that Will and Alan have set up, I've noticed that if I don't have like a kettlebell, there's instructions for doing something else there. I think it's an important lesson for people to learn, like especially within like this lockdown at the moment, where gyms aren't open and people don't have access to the right equipment, that you can just fill up a rucksack full of books or something heavy and do something. There's no excuses for not be doing something baseball related indoors in your back garden, if it's snowing, like Will with the sock and the ball, sellotape around your arm. There are ways and means to do it. And I think it comes down to, if you want it, you're going to go out there and get it.
Yeah, I think one of the toughest things, and something I've seen articulated very recently, but I think a lot of us struggle, the world over, struggle with motivation. But I think that part of the problem is we're sitting on the sofa wanting to get better at something and waiting for that motivation to hit us. But the motivation only comes when you've already started doing it. The action always comes first. So getting up and doing it is, and then seeing those sort of micro goals being achieved, that's where the motivation comes from. Is you got to start, the action's got to come first. You're never going to get motivated just sitting on a sofa. It's always going to be very easy for you to go, oh, I don't know how to do it. I'm never going to know how to do it. It's just so hard. There's so much to it. Well, okay, start small, and then once you've crossed that barrier, but you got to, the action's got to come first. So yeah, that's something I've struggled with recently, and it's actually helped me. It's helped me with a few other things, not baseball related, work related, but just getting up and getting started. So
there's a chap I listen to sometimes, Jocko Willink, is a great podcast listen for anyone who is out there. After you've listened to Matt, of course, Matt first, British baseball, then listen to Jocko.
Okay.
But he talks about motivation being fleeting. And straight to your point, Alex, that motivation is, we all want it, we all have it, but it's fleeting. And sometimes you have it, sometimes you don't. The thing that's consistent is discipline. You're disciplined to get up and take that action. You're disciplined to as Matt's example, like it's snowy, it's raining outside, but I've still got a ball and a sock and some tape, so I can still get my throwing in. It's discipline that you can be consistent with, and then the motivation, to Alex's point, comes from action. Yeah, I love it.
Very true, mate. Very true.
Awesome. Alex, who stands out to you as some of the better players that you've played with or against in the NBL? And we can take this one off the list. I know that I know where I am on the list. It's probably like one or two, so you can remove me from that point. It's cool. But who? Yeah.
Outside of you, I would say, look, I'm not going to include guys I played with because I've got there's too many good players there. Domestically, Simon Pole is the guy. He's the guy you just didn't ever want to face. I noticed he asked that question because he knew what the answer was. That's why.
I was just going to say, like, there's a listener question from Simon Paul who said, "Who was the pitcher you hated facing the most?"
Yeah, I knew. Yeah, I know he asked that question because it's him. I'd say, domestically, I never liked to play against. I mean, he was just an absolutely amazing baseball player, and you can see it in the stats, but you can see it with the eye too. I mean, the guy just piled up the stats. I did get him a couple of times, but very, very less often, and he was able to get me out. So obviously, he was a great player. Alan Bloomfield, one of my first heroes in British baseball, played against him, played with him for Great Britain, have some great stories, which aren't probably appropriate for this podcast. I have a great one about 1999. I did about telling it, but I better not. He just great character, full of joy, and an amazing baseball player. Really, just quickest hands you've ever seen. I mean, if that guy was born in the States, he's the kind of guy that you could see being, making money playing baseball for sure. So yeah.
One that sticks out in my mind, and it's just because I think he only played 1, maybe 2 seasons in that peak of the NBL, is Dean Stoker. And he's obviously playing in the ABL.
Nasty.
Yeah. Wow.
Dean Stoker was nasty. I didn't, because he didn't play as long, but yeah, he was absolutely nasty. And the Windsor team in 2004 was ridiculous. They had Dennis Grubb, who I didn't include. He hit like 9 home runs that year with wood bat when we were all struggling to learn how to make contact. But he was in Double-A with the Yankees, and Brett Willenberg, who played shortstop in the first World Baseball Classic for South Africa. He was in the minors and his season was done, and decided to come play in British baseball for a month. I mean, there was some incredible talent at that time. Stoker was nasty, absolutely nasty. I remember that. God, yeah. I think like one of the nice things about playing baseball in Britain, which I haven't ever been able to achieve anywhere else, was the rivalries, and having a rival last for 10, 12 years, playing against the same guys, playing against the guys from Bracknell and seeing them every year, and actually being able to compete with them every year, and knowing you're going to face Simon Pole's Warriors. And, it was, that's a nice thing. Like you don't get that in the States because in high school or college baseball, because your time there, you might only play varsity baseball for 2 years, or in my case, 1 year. So yeah, it was, that's one of the nice things and thing I miss big time. So
awesome. Matt, were there any other listener questions?
Yeah.
Other than Simon Pole's kind of wanted to get a shout out for himself.
Yeah, he only has to ask and I'll do it. But yeah, the coach Marcelino has written in saying, question for Houdis: why are you able to see the world when you are sleeping?
Yeah. It's just one of my many skills, mate. Just one of my many skills, and tell him I don't trust him. So, I just got to keep an eye on him or two.
Another sleep-related question comes from Craig Savage, who we talked about before, saying, I want to know why the freak sleeps with his eyes open. So
it's the same. Yeah, it's the same question. They always seem to like to bring that up. I do sleep my eyes open. My daughter does as well. My youngest, she'll sleep, and they're not wide open. I'm not literally sleeping like this. They're slightly partially open. I don't know. I got big eyeballs.
That's good for me.
Yeah.
That's literally all that I have. Thank you both for your time today. It's been amazing. I mean, I love just taking a back seat and listening to your share, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to get Will on there, because of the knowledge that you both have and playing together. Because without Will being here, it's probably me just saying, so Alex, what's your favorite tree? And
I've got a list here.
We'll say that for British baseball tree cast later on. But yeah, it's I like to leave the last word open to the guest. So Alex, have you got anything that you'd like to leave us with, or have you got any shout outs you'd like to give, or parting advice?
Oh, I mean, I miss playing baseball in Britain. I mean, I'm obviously here now, and I love being in Australia, but I do miss British baseball. The relationships I built, there's so many people that were part of my life when I was playing baseball over there that I miss. So I do. Oh, hello. Oh, hi, sorry. Right. Yeah, I mean, so I've lost my train of thought now.
Shout outs or any thanks that you'd like to give, or any parting advice?
Yeah. I mean, I want a couple of shout outs. One is Josh Chetwynd, who got me playing baseball again after I wasn't sure I wanted to. I had, I was putting a lot of stress and pressure on myself playing baseball, and he got me playing again, and I'm glad he did, because that was 21 years ago and I'm still playing. So yeah, I'm glad he did. Because like I said, the experiences I've had playing baseball, some of the greatest, have given me some fantastic memories. So
that's awesome. Thank you very much. Will, again, thank you very much for your time. As always, you've been a valuable addition to the show, whether it's your listeners' questions that you come in, or I know your co-hosting duties. That's such a good job. Please don't get yourself a podcast, because I'll be out of a job very quick. I've just invested a lot of money into.
Fun with yours, my man. I've far too much fun with yours.
That was brilliant, and thanks for the surprise. Thanks for organising this, Matt, and Will. Love to the family, man.
Likewise. Please give my best.
We see you soon.
Yeah.
Take care,
Thanks
guys.
so much, Matt.
Thank you so much.
No worries. Thank you very much.